I have the honour today of introducing our speaker, Gillian Dooley, who many of you probably know. But first, let me acknowledge that we meet here on the unceded lands of the Kaurna people, Kaurna Yata, and we pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and thank them for their care of this country and culture over time. Now, Gillian Dooley wears many hats. She was a research librarian at Flinders University, in charge of special collections, and then publishing support for many years. But during those years she was also active in literary scholarship. She founded a journal called Transnational Literature, which was quite pioneering in its day, and she put into practice her interest in transnational literature by writing about such authors as V.S. Naipaul and J.M. Coetzee, both noted post-colonial authors. In another kind of transnational, Gillian's always been very interested in Matthew Flinders and his legacy and his encounters. So it's like a very local transnationalism, if you like. In that capacity, she has published widely in relation to Flinders. Wildly too, probably. The wild is yet to come. But there is wild in this, actually, because one of the books that she's worked on is Trim, the book about Flinders' cat, but also working with Daniel Clode on a Wakefield Press anthology called The First Wave, exploring early coastal contact history in Australia, as well as being co-editor of Matthew Flinders' private journal in 2005. And as if all of that wasn't enough, Gillian's interest, particularly in that period of Flinders, is connected to her current work on Jane Austen. And this year, 2025, has been a particularly big year for Jane Austen. It's her 250th anniversary, and also a very big year for Gillian, who told me just now that she is just back from a tour of the UK and Ireland, giving 14 concerts and presentations up and down the UK in relation to Jane Austen and her music, which is the subject of Gillian's latest book. There's information about that available at the back, and the reason why the piano is in the room, as we'll discover later. So please welcome Gillian Dooley.
Thank you, Nick, for that wonderful, warm introduction. I feel the honour is all mine to be introduced by Nick. Thank you. I think I did one of these in 2012 or 2013, and I did just a books in my life then. I think I was sort of the last minute stand-in for somebody, so it was no doubt put together in a bit of a rush. And so I thought I would do something different this time, and I thought, oh well, music books in my life, that's a nice sort of easily contained subject, isn't it? And then I started working on it and thought, oh my goodness. Okay, so there is actually quite a lot for me to say about music books in my life. And perhaps a lot of people ask me, well, what's a literary scholar doing getting interested in music? And to me, I'm interested in music as a person, and I'm also interested in literature as a person, rather than a literary scholar being sort of crossing a divide and being interested in music. So, and I thought I'd just give you a quick backdrop of why music is so important to me in my life. And I scoured through, I've been going through my old photograph albums, and to try and find a photo of my mother and father playing their instruments. I've managed to find my mother with my younger brother Michael Dooley, who's a noted composer. And so there she is at our family piano. And I couldn't find my father playing the piano or the cello anywhere in my albums, but this is a night out in probably about 1974 with my father, probably at the Canberra Theatre, I think, because we lived in Canberra. So that's, it would have been a musical night out, definitely. So, the music was there. There is Michael again with his trombone, and my younger brother Philip with his recorder in the front, in the family sitting room. And then on this side there we have what's happening with the next generation. So my eldest brother Tony and Michael again with a grandchild on each one's lap, and at the piano at Tony's place. And then at the same occasion, my brother Nick, who's also a pianist and a jazz musician, a very excellent jazz musician, and Michael with his guitar, because he can pick up anything. And so we've got trombone, piano and guitar just on the one slide with Michael. And a friend singing there. So that's the sort of thing that happens whenever we get together. There's always music. Phil, I couldn't find, there's a photo of Phil, I know there's a photo of Phil with his tuba on his lap, or I'm not sure if it's on his lap because he was about 7 years old and he was playing the tuba. And, it's a wonderful photo and I just cannot find it. But he has become a science communicator and uses music in his science communication. To such incredible, wonderful effect. I'm not sure if there's... so if you look up Philip on science, then you'll find things like his wonderful... He uses... Oh, when the science is, of course, Oh, when the saints. But Schrodinger's cat, the quantum paradox, I couldn't tell you what the song is, but it's one of those instantly recognisable sort of rap songs. And he's made Schrodinger's cat from this wonderful rap song. And it's in the brilliant video. You must look these up and look at them. So music books. So I finally get to books. Music books were, of course, always part of the family because we were a basically classical music family. Although Nick was the rebel and he liked the Beatles in 1964, which was pretty out there. So here are some of the music books that I've inherited from my family. On that side, which is your left, we have the Mozart Sonata and Fugue for 2 pianos, 4 hands, with a note to Nana dear, a very happy anniversary for 35 and many future ones. Love, Jim. So that's my parents. That's my dad giving this to Mum as an anniversary present in, I think that would be 1984. And on the right, this is my mother. So I'm not sure who this note is to. I thought this might suit you for the lullaby closing of the curtain arietta. So so this is what Mum typically did with her music books. She covered them often in brown paper, but then she would put a wrapping paper cover on the outside. Recycled wrapping paper, of course. But that was the Grieg lyric album. And the childhood music for me, well, you know, Bach is, the children's Bach, of course, was an obvious one, but we also had these small preludes, and that's the typical what Mum would do with the preludes, the small preludes. So that's one I've inherited now. And on the right, this is the French suites that I now own. I mean, I own all of these books, but this has absolutely fallen apart. But it's one of the pieces of music, one of the music books that I continually use. And if we have time, how are we going for time? Is there a timepiece anywhere here? What time is it? But what time is it? 1:15. Okay. I thought if we had time, I'd quickly just play a movement from the French suite. I'm not a pianist. See, this is. I've lost the front cover years ago. It might be somewhere in the pile, but maybe I'll find it one day again. But it's a Peters edition from probably somewhere in the 19th century, I would say. Clock. Good, excellent. Okay, so these are some other music books that I inherited from my parents. Haydn sonatas, which is another one of my favourite go-to books. I love playing the slow movements of Haydn sonatas because I'm not good enough to play the fast ones. Francis and Day's Family and a popular and community songbook for all occasions, and things like the Mosquitoes Parade, and we also had the Teddy Bears Picnic, which Dad used to play for us. And they've all typically got Dooley written on them in my mother's handwriting. And you know, her ministrations to make sure she kept it covered in plastic and had masking tape down the sides and all that sort of thing. That's very, very typical. Now, outside the home, the probably biggest, I mean, I had piano lessons from the age of 6, but probably the biggest musical influence that I had was joining choirs, and particularly this choir, the Canberra Children's Choir, which I joined in 1969. And the amazing woman who ran this choir, Judith Klingon, who's celebrating her 80th birthday this year, which means she's only 10 years older than me. I mean, you know, she was doing all this in her early 20s. It's just incredible. And the thing I love about this, she was an artist as well as a wonderful musician. She is, I should say. She designed all this book. She did this beautiful book of 100 or more pages of music, handwritten. I'm not sure about the copyright of everything, but I've taken this madrigal, Sweet Honeysucking Bees by John Wilby, to a semi-professional adult choir, and said, well, you know, we sang this in the children's choir, so surely we should be able to do it. And they tried to sight read through it and said, nah, that's too hard. We weren't told how hard it was. We weren't told that the music we were singing was difficult. So we just did it. And that was the best musical education, I think. In 1969, there we are in the Australian Women's Weekly. Judy's the elegant woman on the right there. And Princess Anne did a Christmas message on our Christmas record. So she was so enterprising to have all this happen to this group of rather ragtag young kids. Now Michael, my brother, is the one in glasses, third from the right, who's looking a little bit sort of, his shirt's hanging out a bit. He was a delightful, adorable child. Still is. So another part of my musical sort of teenagehood was playing the hymns at school. So Canberra Church of England Girls Grammar School. I was there from 68 to 73, and I somehow got the job of playing. I was absolutely, certainly not the best pianist in the school, but I somehow got the job of being the hymn player for assembly every morning. And so this English hymnal was sort of on loan to me, and it just sort of seemed to never got returned. And even though it says school copy to remain in the music room for the time being, I'm not quite sure whose signature that is. Perhaps the headmistress. So I hope that the former headmistress of Keats now lives in Adelaide. I don't suppose you're in the audience, are you, Mrs. Shaw? She did come to something that I did last year, and it was quite terrifying. I am very happy to have this. It's falling apart, as the best music books do. But I feel, you know, one day I'll have to confess that I have the school copy. But then, as an interesting sidelight, this is also among my music books, and this is Hymns Ancient and Modern. It was presented to Miss M.A. Jacob, a gift to Miss Jacob, as a mark of esteem and regard from the members of the St David's congregation, Burnside, Easter 1907. Now, Miss M.A. Jacob was my great aunt and my godmother, and I was born in Melbourne. Most of her family was, but the generation before, many of them were here. So she was an organist at St David's Burnside, where I have spent so much time and done so much music there. So that was wonderful discovering that. And they were much more happy to give her a hymn book than my school was. Talking about gifts of music, my darling mother, discovered a bookbinder. And so around about the middle of the 70s, I started getting these beautifully bound books. So rather than packing tape and brown paper, I've got these 3 books bound in brown leather. There's Mendelssohn Songs Without Words, there's Schubert songs, and Haydn canzonettas songs. No, sorry, it's not Schubert songs, it's Schubert. Schubert songs would be that wide. It's the Schubert Moments Musicaux and some impromptus as well. So, and they've all got my initials, GMAD, Gillian Mary Adele, after Mary Adele Jacob, on the covers as well, and with an inscription inside about the occasion. She didn't always get things bound. This one, I'm not sure that I realised that my copy of the Beatles Complete was given to me by my mother on the 14th of November 1975, and that's a wonderful gift, because she didn't share our enthusiasm for the Beatles. I mean, she accepted that we were, especially Michael and I were great Beatles fans. So she gave us that. She gave me that. Now, this is probably the first piece of music the first musical score that I bought with my own money. I went to a performance of Purcell's Dido and Aeneas I don't know, sometime in the early to mid-70s. I bought this score and thought, orange and white, really, for Purcell's beautiful Dido and Aeneas, and so I covered it myself in a beautiful sort of black and gold paper. But you can see it's bought at the Canberra Music Centre, so it was before I left Canberra, and I got to know. I still know I could sing Dido and Aeneas from beginning to end, including the overture. It's just part of my brain. This is another one that's also very much part of my musical beginnings. I absolutely love this operetta, and think that Sullivan is actually a wonderful composer, and also Gilbert is a wonderful wordsmith, and this is, to me, their masterpiece. So I bought a copy when I came to, so that would have been the early 80s when I came to Adelaide. Opus Music Importers was a company that my then husband, Darryl Cahoon, or partner, we did get married at some stage, my partner, he founded it and I helped him. We ran it together for a few years. And so I was able to I had suddenly all these music catalogues that I could look through and find things. So I bought a copy of my own vocal score of Iron Lanthe. But then when my darling parents died in 2004, I was the lucky one who got the family copy of Iron Lanthe. So I now have 2 scores of Iron Lanthe. So if that's ever useful, well, just let me know. And of course, moving into university times, the ANU Choral Societies, SCUNA, ANUSC, so that's, and UNCS is University of New South Wales Choral Society. Each of the choral societies of the universities around Australia had their own, well, most of them had their own songbooks. And that was, I think, my choral activities during university, along with some other activities, probably were the reason why I didn't get an honours degree at the time. But I was learning an awful lot. It's from 18 to 20. So this was my first trip to Adelaide in 1974, and there we are in Victoria Square, having a publicity march and sing on the 29th of August 1974. Is there anyone identify themselves in that photo? Is anyone here in that photo? Possibly, yes. So I met many good friends who are still friends at that in that year. And as a sideline, the amateur operaticals, I call them. So here's me being Mad Margaret in Ruddigore, which was huge fun. And somehow I sort of got typecast as the mad woman, I think, because if you look up on the balcony, there's this rather shambolic woman looking down at the action of La Boheme. I was only a chorus member, but they still dressed me up as a mad woman, so I don't know what that's all about at the age of 22. Anyways, and then it turned out that that's the 250th production of the Canberra Repertory Society. It wasn't an opera society. I did sing with Canberra Opera for a few of their performances as well, only in the chorus, of course. So, how are we going? Yes, not necessarily a system to be recommended. I really must get around to sorting out my music one day. That's sort of one of those loops, you know. I'm rather better at sorting out my books than my music books, because, I mean, so much music is, well, if you can see what's on the piano, I'll show you later. So much of my music is just loose sheets of paper, because these days we often print things from the internet rather than buying music books anymore. But there are still quite a few books of music there, and when I want one of them, it's usually a matter of starting at the right hand and just flicking through and finding it, or else it's on the piano, because I've performed it sometime in the last 5 years. But you see my Schubert song album is there beside the Bach. And I think there's a Chopin Preludes behind that as well. And my parents' wedding photo on the piano as well. These are a couple of my other favourite composers. I love the music of this era, Gershwin, Porter, Duke Ellington, and I love singing those songs, and I only really ever sing them with my brothers. With either Mike or, well, Phil can do it too, Nick or Mike or Phil. Tony is a more classical musician like me. We were the ones who were good in our music lessons and only played what was on the page, whereas Nick was very naughty and kept improvising and getting his knuckles rapped. But of course now he can improvise, which I think is the most wonderful gift of all with music. But anyway, that's... These are two of the standard things that one needs if one's a choral singer, the Europäische Madrigale, and the Augsburger carols, very, very useful for choral singers. And I have several things like that in my music. Music reference books, of course, bought or inherited. They're much neater, obviously, because they're much more, solidly bound. Graham Stroll's early music dictionaries there, for example, and I've got glamorous musicals and all-time favourite Australian songbook, which is sort of folk songs, and all the Grove's musical instruments. I haven't got Grove's Dictionary of Music, unfortunately, but lots of different music reference books. Musical biography and history. I love reading these things. Revolution in the Head is a wonderful book if you haven't read it. It's every Beatles song analysed and the history of every Beatles song and the circumstances. It's just fabulous. But so are all the others, of course. And John Eliot Gardner's book on Bach is pretty good. Australian music history. These are a couple of books. First Fleet Piano that's just volume 2, which is just the appendices. Volume 1 is 3 times the size and is incredibly detailed, by Geoffrey Lancaster, who was in the Canberra Children's Choir with me, and we're still friends. And Memories of Musical Lives is more recent. Rosemary Richards is a very old friend of mine from those university days, and Eula Schuster, who many of you probably know, is an Adelaide musicologist and a singer as well. Musical fiction, of course, music makes a wonderful subject for fiction, for novels, and these are just three of my favourites that I have sort of pulled off the shelf. Vikram Seth's Unequal Music, Sean Williams. People will know Sean, the wonderful Sean Williams, from who's at Flinders now, and is mainly a science fiction writer. But Impossible Music is not science fiction. It's about an Adelaide musician who's going deaf, and what is going to happen next. So I really recommend that. And Tim Winton's wonderful Dirt Music, of course. And musical memoirs. Now, I could not find, I know I've got a copy of Piano Lessons, I cannot find it. So if I lent it to anyone, please let me know. I'm sure that tends to be what happens, I love a book so much that I want to lend it to someone, and that's that. So, Emma Ayres, who's now, of course, Ed LeBrock, a wonderful, incredible book about riding from all across Europe, and Asia with her viola on her back. And Stephen Huff is always good value. He's a wonderful writer as well as a wonderful pianist. And now, music and literature. So, how did that happen? Well, it was always, to me, when I was reading, when I was studying literature, I always noticed the music. And obviously I'm not the only one. So Karen Zilling, brought out this very useful book called The Original Songs in Shakespeare Plays, where she's traced as much as she can the songs that were performed in the first performances, and provided transcripts of them. Now, when I was writing about John J.M. Coetzee, so this book came out, I think, in 2010. So I wrote a chapter on language and languages, and I wrote, "There is a strong feeling in Coetzee that all music, not just singing, can be a form of speech." Now, there were some very cross comments in one of the reviews about that, music's not a language, and I thought, as I always do when someone's cross with me, I think, they're wrong and I'm right. And so I therefore went and wrote this article called The Origins of Speech, Line, Song, Music as Language in Coetzee's Age of Iron. Because he definitely uses it as a form of communication between characters in that novel, and in other novels as well. So that was published in an obscure Italian journal in 2020, I think that says. Now, Matthew Flinders. What on earth has Matthew Flinders got to do with any of this? Well, I discovered Matthew, as Nick said, I was the Special Collections Librarian down at Flinders. So I first sort of course I knew about Flinders basically, but when I was the Special Collections Librarian, I started indexing the collection that is held down there of Flinders material, and started reading what he'd written. I started reading his private extracts from his private journal. I started reading his wonderful biographical essay in memory of Trim, his cat. And I thought, this man is a writer. He's not just a guy on a pedestal who drew maps. He's a writer. He was a wonderful writer. So, and then I found he had a flute, and he wrote, and he played the flute, and so, and his flute still exists and is held by his family at the moment. So when I published my book, Matthew Flinders, The Man Behind the Map, I included a chapter, When Tired of Writing, I Apply to Music, music in Flinders' life. And it was an important resource for him when he was detained on Mauritius. It was important not just as a personal resource, but he would also play music with other people. And in the very recent book, Wakefield book, Nooks and Crannies, my chapter is Matthew Flinders' Flute. So that's a fascinating book of all sorts of stories of South Australia. I recommend that from Wakefield Press. Iris Murdoch. Okay, so another one of my... Iris Murdoch was a subject of my... one of the subjects of my PhD thesis. And you know, I could see the music in her novels. There's lots of music in her novels. She loved music, even though she wasn't a skilled musician. But she loved singing, she loved music, and it often appears. So there's my Iris Murdoch sort of shelf or part of it. Music was a subject of an 80s book, which I think was someone's thesis, called Sound and Sense, Musical Illusions, in the novels of Iris Murdoch. But my interest sort of became, I think I've done 2 concerts at conferences now of Iris Murdoch's musical illusions in Iris Murdoch. So this was in St Anne's College, Oxford, 2019, a concert that I curated. And my book, Listening to Iris Murdoch, which quite coincidentally came out almost at the same time as my book on Matthew Flinders. But it's music, listening to Iris Murdoch, music, sounds and silences. So it's very much music in her novels rather than music in her life, although there's a little bit about that. Finally, okay, we're not doing too badly. Finally, we get to Jane Austen and music. So what's the big deal about Jane Austen and music? And people keep asking me this. I'm not the first person to notice it. That book on the left, Robert Wallace's Jane Austen and Mozart, it's not really an examination of the novels. It is. It's looking at Jane Austen's novels and Mozart's piano concertos as exercises in form, classical equilibrium. And then the Innocent Diversion is really looking at music in the novels. And that was probably the 90s, I think, or 80s. Anyway, so my initial interest in music in Jane Austen was once again back at school. Third form English class. I had a wonderful teacher. We had a wonderful English teacher, and she's trying to get us to think about how Jane Austen distinguishes her characters from each other. How does she, how does she sort of characterise each of her characters? And I put my hand up and said, well, obviously the way Mary Bennet plays the piano and the way Elizabeth Bennet plays the piano is different, and that's something that we can see about their characters. And the teacher, she's a wonderful teacher, don't want to criticise her, but she said, no, that's nothing to do with it. And I know you're wrong, because Mary Bennet had worked hard for knowledge and accomplishments, but Elizabeth, easy and unaffected, had been listened to with much more pleasure, though not playing half so well. That has got to be an important statement. So that led in 1995 to my honours thesis. So I went through the novels and looked for the meaning of music in the novels of Jane Austen, supervised by the wonderful Humphrey Tranter, who I'm sure many of you will remember. And then that became published in the Journal of the Jane Austen Society of Australia as Musicianship and Morality in the Novels of Jane Austen. I would never call an article that now, but in 2010 that's what it ended up being called. And then in 2004 I discovered a bit more about the music collection. I think I knew that there was a music collection in theory, but I didn't really know much about it, and there wasn't really much of a chance for me to find out what was in it and to explore it. So somebody gave me this CD, or alerted me to the existence of Jane Austen's songbook, which is all the songs in one of Jane Austen's manuscript books. That led to the first Jane Austen's music concert, which was in May down at Flinders in the Noel Stockdale Room. And it's been the first of countless performances of Jane Austen's music. And I found these were my references, Jane Austen's music. So there are the music books that belong to Jane Austen and her family have been kind of roughly and quite randomly divided in half. And half of them came down one branch of the family and half of them came down the other. And kind of never the twain shall meet in a way, except although they have now online. So these were the two indexes that I had to work from, and I could find out what the music was, even though I couldn't access at the time copies of it. Now, in 2015, the University of Southampton digitised their collection. So that is freely available online at Internet Archive. These are the title pages of two of her two earliest manuscript books. The one on the left, that little tag in the middle says Juvenile Songs and Lessons in a rather fancy handwriting, and then underneath it in someone else's handwriting, and I wonder who that was, it says, for young musicians who don't know enough to practice. And that one is mainly piano music, it's all instrumental music. The other one is songs and duets, and it is mainly songs and duets. I think there's one solo piano piece in there. So she seems to have had these two books concurrently, and she was copying music from, we don't always know where, but she was making copies of music so that she could play them herself and sing them herself. So this is a kind of summary of what the Austen family music books are. 7 volumes believed to have belonged to her, 2 are pre-bound blank manuscript books that she copied music into, 3 are printed music, either given to her or bought by her perhaps if she could afford it. 2 are sort of a mixture of both. And then there are 14 other volumes which belong to various members of the family circle, her sisters-in-law, her teacher, who was a distant relation, and some of her nieces. And so when they were digitised, we didn't have they didn't have enough resources to create a detailed index of each piece of music. They did it at album level, so there was one catalogue record for each album. So there could have been 100 pieces of music in that album. They were listed, but you couldn't search, you couldn't sort by that, you know. And I wanted granularity in my data. So I offered to do that. Well, I was going to do it anyway, but I thought I might as well do it for the University of Southampton Library Catalogue. And so I tried to date each piece of music accurately. Often Jane's manuscript would have not even a title or a composer or anything on it. So I had to just, the music itself and perhaps the lyrics to go on. So these days there are so many ways of tracing melodies and things that didn't exist 20 years ago even. So I was able to solve a few mysteries, but there are still a few mysteries, so you'll be glad to hear from the work I did. And this Michael Cassler's music entries at Stationers Hall was one of the very, very basic and useful reference books. And I met Michael Cassler at a conference last year, which was a lot of fun. So there's a Jane Austen's music website, blah, blah, blah. So I've tried to sort of gather all the stuff about Jane Austen's music, all my publications and everything on that. So if you want to sort of go and have a look at that and browse it, that's where you can do that. It wasn't really until, quite late in the day that I thought that I could bring the music collection and the novels together. So I was looking at them sort of as separate things. So I was thinking that I was not tempted, I was trying not to be tempted to think that her music had a sort of significant influence on her novel writing. I think that there is a sort of way in which it couldn't help having some sort of influence because it was part of who she was, being a musician. But this was a sort of thought experiment, if you like. There's this wonderful ballad called Colin and Lucy, which was about an abandoned maiden who dies of love and then has her revenge on her faithless lover. And it had so many resonances with Sense and Sensibility that I thought, well, let me see what I can do with this. So that ended up once again being published in a fairly obscure Italian, well, obscure to us. But it is actually the last chapter in my recent book. Oh, look, my recent book. She played and sang Jane Austen and music. So that's the contents page. So that was published last year. It's really a dream of mine to bring together all these, a book about Jane Austen's music, and it's really been a wonderful exercise, and it's led to a lot of wonderful other things. And it's just come out in paperback. There is a discount voucher on the back table if you're interested, if you buy it from the publisher. But you might as well, it's probably cheaper just to go to your local bookshop and ask for it, because it is a trade book. It's not just an academic book. And then this is the sort of thing that has happened since, which is that I've been invited to be a fellow at the Blackie House Library and Museum in Edinburgh, and that's the wonderful William Zacks, Bill Zacks, holding my book. He's the director of that museum. They own two of the volumes of Jane Austen's or Austen family music that isn't yet digitised and indexed. So he wants me to index them. And also with my dear friend Laura Klein, who's from Denver, Colorado, and is a Jane Austen pianist. He's invited us to create Jane Austen's songbooks, and a Jane Austen songbook and a Jane Austen piano book. And this is us in the middle of July at 2 days' notice doing a recital at 8 College Street, Winchester. Now, who knows the significance of 8 College Street, Winchester? She does. It's the house where Jane Austen died. So they've recently opened it as a museum. There's a square piano in there from 1817, which is the year she died. And it's the sort of piano that she would have played on. and we were privileged to be able to do a recital in that house, which is just such a wonderful honour. And so the Jane Austen songbook, we're working on it. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but so we're going to have sort of 8 parts of each section, and it will be first her childhood music that she would have inherited from her music teacher, and all through her life, and then finally her 4 last songs, which is what I call the songs that her niece remembers her singing at the end of her life. So I thought, if we still have probably a few minutes, I can have a drink of water, I might sing the first and the last song from the Jane Austen's songbook. The first one is a song by Thomas Arne called Lotharia, which was in her teacher's music book, which was mostly manuscript music copied into the book by her teacher, and then Jane inherited the book later in life. And then the last one is one of the 4 last songs, and it's the Yellow-Haired Laddie, the Scottish folk song. So.
Sunshine, here's her
but we're running out of time. So there you go. It's 11:55. How did I do, Nick?
Well, that was absolutely perfect. Gillian, you'd have us here all day. You'll probably have to do an encore in any case. But thank you so much. That was wonderful. So we just do have a few minutes for questions, responses from the audience. Would anyone like to start us off?
This stunned them all.
Yes.
It seems to be fair to say that a lot of your life is dictated by the stubborn reaction to a teacher telling you to go wrong.
Did everyone hear that question? Gillian's stubborn reaction to the teacher telling her she was wrong back in school.
I think that's probably just typical of me. I think, hang on, just don't contradict me because you'll send me off on some. But yes, I think that is. I mean, it's sort of become a bit of a sort of a foundational myth, really, I think. I was talking about it to someone who was in that class, and she said, I don't remember that. Yes, I think there was another one.
There was a question at the back. Comment?
Hello, Roger.
Julian, I wondered if Roger de Lisle's Marseillaise might have come into Jane Austen's look into French Revolutionary music.
Sorry, I didn't catch it.
The French national anthem.
Oh yes, the Marseillaise, yes. Yeah, well, indeed. I mean, the contents of Jane Austen's music book is fascinating because that was a very, very, very small sample of a very, there are nearly 200 pieces of music in her manuscript hand alone, and about 2/3 of them are songs. And there are all sorts of things from at the beginning of the PowerPoint. I guess we can probably go out and then maybe start again. Start from the beginning again. That manuscript there in the background is the Chanson Béarnaise, which is a French counter-revolutionary ballad that she's written out. She hasn't written a bass line in it at all. The notes there are coming through from the other side of the page. So she's only written the melody, and she's written those. You can see there's a verse under the music, but there's 3 more verses under that, and then on the next page there are another 4 verses, I think. So she's written out all these verses about how absolutely appalling it is that Louis and Marie Antoinette have been imprisoned in Paris. And this was very controversial to own. It would have been in Paris. It would have been very controversial to own it. In fact, somebody, it was evidence against one of the noblemen who was executed. But on the other hand, within a few pages of that, she had the Marseillaise, the Marseille March. Once again, I mean, she wrote out the accompaniment. She wrote out all 9 verses of it. Mm-hmm. And if you know the in French, and if you know the words of the Marseillaise, mm-hmm. they are really, that it's there's blood running in the furrows, and it's just So I find it really interesting that she had both of those sides. She represented in her. This was when she was a teenager. So.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Roger. Yeah. Judy.
Hello. I think it was wonderful for somebody like me who made a living out of buying and selling of music and having a tin ear and no knowledge to see the sort of music that a family of classical musicians had as something that they use every day. It put a human context on a lot of what I've done in my life. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Judith. Yes, Judith worked at Pioneer Books for many, many years. years, and of course handled a lot of music as well as a lot of wonderful books. Yes. Yes.
I'm just creeping over here to get a present for Gillian. But is there any other question or comment? Anyway, Gillian, you'll be sticking around, so people
Yes,
can,
I'm not running away
grab you
right
around.
away. So.
But thank you again. It was so wonderful and such a wonderful collection of images. That group at Victoria Square. What year was that?
1974.
1974. It's pretty fantastic. So on behalf of the Friends, thank you very much. And here's a present from us to you, one more book to add to your collection.
Thank you so much. Thank you.